I'm just thinking about psychological games, really prompted because one of my kids has developed this habit of just before he goes out the door, just last minute, when he's got to go to college or something like that, he'll suddenly think of something he has to do. So he'll dash around the house, looking for his timetable or I don't know, doing something, which makes it all a bit panicky last minute. And he might even be late, you know what I mean? But it's so regular that you can see it's not it's not kind of genuine. There's something else going on there, and I think it's part of a psychological game. And by that I don't mean a conscious Machiavellian type game that he's playing with his family unconsciously. I don't think it's that. I just think there's something going on there. It's one of those games that I think we all have, And my take on that really is it comes out of transaction analysis. I used to read quite a bit about transaction analysis at one point, which is a pretty simple social psychology model really for how people interact. I think Theremin Trees actually has done a series on it, which is pretty good. But part of transaction analysis is the understanding of psychological games and the way people play them. And and some of them are so stereotyped that there's even names for these games. Eric Berne is the guy who wrote most about this. Quite a well-known book called Games People Play and Games Alcoholics Play, and there's a whole series of those. But as I said, they're quite well known, and they're not played for fun. They're played for keeps. But they're not games that have winners and losers as such, but they are games that come with prizes, and they're referred to as tokens in transaction analysis. You get tokens if you play the game according to the kind of script of it, according to how it's supposed to be played. It awards you tokens in some way, and sometimes it's a bit complicated that. But secondarily to that, the reason why anybody would play a game and the reason why anybody would try to strive to win these tokens in these little interactions that we all have, these game-like interactions that we have, is in order to fulfill a kind of primary directive, which is about the maintenance of a consistent identity, a consistent sense of who you are and what kind of a person you are and what you do, that kind of stuff. Because that seems to be really important within lots of psychological models actually, but in day-to-day life you can kind of recognise that no one likes to think of themselves as someone that's highly changeable. It's kind of disconcerting to think that you might believe something completely different tomorrow than you believe today, or that you might suddenly find a religion. It's inconceivable, or that you might be suddenly good at something that you've been bad at your whole life, or suddenly become bad at something that you've been good at your whole life. And when those things do happen, they are disconcerting. Or if your tastes change radically, you can't imagine that happening because it's a component of your identity. And as I say, preserving a stable identity seems to be kind of prime directive. And these psychological games that are identified in transactional analysis, are at least partially to do with the preservation and reinforcement of those identities trained. So you play a game in order to receive a token, and that token is a mark of what kind of a person you are. And some of those tokens aren't necessarily positive. I mean, that's the other thing about this. Not only does these games not have winners and losers, they don't necessarily confer benefits. They might confer tokens, but some of these are what's referred to in transactional analysis as brown tokens, which means that they tell you how shit you are at certain things, or as a person, which might sound like something you wouldn't want. But if you have a definition of yourself as a shitty person in certain ways, it might be more important to you psychologically to have that understanding of yourself confirmed in order to preserve a stable identity than it is to actually be good at something or actually change your opinion of yourself in that area. So if you are the sort of person, and I'm not trying to psychoanalyze my own son here anyway, but if you are the kind of person, for example, that sees themselves as someone who is always late, or sees themselves as always working to a deadline, or always sees themselves as fraught, or always sees themselves as disorganised, rather than do something about it, like get organised, or like get out of bed 10 minutes earlier, or make sure you've got everything in your bag the night before, any of the kinds of things that you would need to do, it can be more important, as I say, psychologically, to continue to think of yourself as disorganised and do things which confirm that understanding of yourself. Like running around the house at the last minute trying to find something that you don't really need or that you should have got ready the night before. Just so it can precipitate a situation, a psychological game, in which that particular brown token is handed out to you. So you can come out of the house in a state of disrepair and flustered, thinking, yeah, I really am disorganised. I really can't get things together. Yeah. I think being a teenager is really a game-ridden era. You know what I mean? I can remember very clearly a lot of the kind of gamey stuff that I used to do, and probably still do, to be honest. I'm not saying I'm transparent to myself now, but I think being a teenager, when you're forming your identity, or a mature identity, it's really, really important to. It feels really important at the time to obey the prime directive, even at the cost of being late or being a bit of a gimp sometimes.